Everybody, it is JT Sports. I'm back to you guys with another 2021 NFL mock draft. This is my second mock draft of this offseason, and this mock draft will involve trades. One person in the comment section said that it's not a mock draft if it isn't no trades. So this mock draft will have trades. Now, here's what I do when it comes to these mock drafts. For those of you guys who are new to the channel, make sure that you guys go ahead, like the video, and subscribe, because I upload NFL videos and college football videos daily. But I try to put myself in the general manager role of all 32 NFL teams. So basically, the players who are mocked to certain teams are the players I would choose for that certain team if I were the GM. And I try to make these mock drafts as realistic as possible. I don't try to have a bunch of crazy, unnecessary trades. Like somebody had Najee Harris going in the top 10 to the Atlanta Falcons. Like, I try to make these mock drafts as realistic as possible. And even if a lot of you guys disagree with some of the selections, it shouldn't really be nothing outrageous that makes you go down the comment section and makes you want to call me an idiot or anything like that. So most of these selections and these trades will make sense. So let's go ahead and get into it. So with the first couple of selections, they haven't really changed all that much from my first mock draft. I have Trevor Lawrence going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Nothing really needs to be said about that. Zach Wilson going number 2 to the New York Jets. I have Devontae Smith going number 3 to the Miami Dolphins. And I have a video coming up about Devontae Smith, because Devontae Smith, to me, going to the Miami Dolphins is a really good fit. I think he's better than Ja'Marr Chase. At first, I was in between, but now going back and the more I think about it, I think Devontae Smith is a more complete wide receiver than Ja'Marr Chase. Like, everybody keeps saying they don't know how Devontae Smith's skill set will translate to the NFL. And I'm just looking at people and I'm like, what do you mean how his skill set translate to the NFL? I mean, Devontae Smith may not be the fastest guy. He may not be the biggest guy. He may not even be the strongest guy. But what Devontae Smith is a football player. And what I mean by calling Devontae Smith a football player, everything on the field that he does is fundamentally sound. He runs very good routes. He has a very high football IQ. He runs his routes and his releases based on the leverage of the corners. He comes back to the football. He does all of the little things that you expect a wide receiver to do right. And a lot of these wide receivers that are coming out now, they're all about speed. Teams aren't really looking at route running. They just want the biggest and fastest guys. And nobody really thinks about the nuances of the position. Devontae Smith is a football player. When he steps on the field, this guy is a technician. He's fundamentally sound. That's what I look for in a wide receiver. That's not only what I look for in a wide receiver, but that's all I look for when I evaluate prospects. Okay, I'm not looking for the most athletic guy, the guy with the most upside. I'm looking for the guy who's the most technical and the most fundamentally sound prospect, because those prospects majority of times end up being really good at the NFL level. And in the NFL, being big and being fast only gets you so far. If you don't understand the game and you don't have good technique or good fundamentals, the majority of the time you're going to end up being a bust. Have Justin Fields going to the Atlanta Falcons with the 4th overall selection. I think he would be a really good pick for the Atlanta Falcons. I don't think he is a day one starter as of right now, but I do think if he was to sit behind Matt Ryan for a year and then come in and start, I think he would be a really good quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons. He also would help out that run game, since they have a head coach who is a run-heavy coach. You could utilize Justin Fields in a lot of RPO situations, a lot of read options, a lot of design quarterback runs. He could really open up the run game for Atlanta. Penei Sewell from Oregon going to the Cincinnati Bengals. There are a surprising amount of people who have the Cincinnati Bengals taking either Devontae Smith or Ja'Marr Chase. And I'm kind of a little bit confused why people have Cincinnati taking wide receivers, because I don't know if a lot of people watched the Cincinnati Bengals play last year, but their biggest weakness most definitely was not wide receiver. As a matter of fact, they have a really good young group of wide receivers. Their biggest weakness was their offensive line, which ended up leading to Joe Burrow getting injured. So you think more people would have Cincinnati marked to take an offensive tackle instead of wide receivers. It just really blows me. Like, I understand why people would see Cincinnati taking Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, or Ja'Marr Chase. I just feel like offensive tackle is just so more it's just so much of a bigger need than just wide receiver, because you can get a good wide receiver in the later rounds of the draft. Like Cincinnati got T. Higgins in the second round last year. So I understand why people could have Cincinnati taking a wide receiver, but I just don't really understand it completely because offensive tackle is just a way bigger need. Number 6 overall, I have Ja'Marr Chase going to the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm still undecided how I feel about Ja'Marr Chase or Kyle Pitts. I feel like either one would be a really good fit. I know the Eagles have Dallas Goedert, but you can utilize Kyle Pitts in so many different ways. But I think what they need right now is a true number 1 wide receiver for Jalen Hurts or whoever will be the quarterback of the future for Philadelphia. I think Ja'Marr Chase would be that guy. Okay, so now this is where things start to get spicy. This is where a lot of things start to take a really questionable turn for a lot of you guys. So probably going to disagree with that. But I have the Chicago Bears trading up to the 7th overall selection with the Detroit Lions. The reason why this trade makes sense because, okay, Detroit, they have Jared Goff. Detroit may not be in the market for a quarterback right now. Detroit, for right now, if they are trying to win right now, then I think they probably would go defense on the defense side of the ball, probably try to get a linebacker or a pass rusher. Well, with the spot that Detroit currently is at right now, I don't really think there's a lot of defensive players or defensive prospects in this year's draft class that are really worth a top 10 pick. Now, if Detroit needed another corner, then I could understand why they stay at 7 and they maybe select Patrick Surtain and Caleb Farley, but they don't need corner because they already drafted Jeff Okudah last year, so they don't really need corner. What they need is edge rusher and a linebacker, and I don't really think there's a prospect in this year's draft class really, unless it's by big team need, that is worth going in the top 10. And I don't think Michael Parsons is worth a top 10 pick. As a matter of fact, I think if you trade down, you still have a good shot of landing Michael Parsons or a pretty good impact player on the defense side of the football. Now, the reason why this trade makes sense for Chicago is because if you're looking at the free agency market right now, the free agency market is pretty thin. We don't know if Dak Prescott is going to get franchise tag. We're speculating that he will, but if you take Dak Prescott out of the equation, then your best option from the free agency market is pretty much Jameis Winston or Alex Smith at this point. So if you're Chicago, you probably are in a spot that you may want to trade up. So I think this makes sense. Now, I'm not going to tell you guys about the compensation and things like that. I don't really think the compensation really matters all that much. I think the big principle of it is that the Detroit Lions trade down when the Chicago Bears trade up and draft Trey Lance, because if you're Chicago, I really think it's really important that you get your quarterback now, because Chicago, regardless of how bad people think Matt Nagy is as a coach, I don't think Chicago is going to be bad enough that they're going to be in a position to draft, a top 10 to get a quarterback in the top 10. I think they probably could be on the outside looking in. So I think Chicago needs to go up and try to get their franchise quarterback of the future and Trey Lance. Now, I know the last time the Bears traded up, and they selected Mitchell Trubisky, which probably gives a lot of you Bears fans out there PTSD, but I think you can't go wrong drafting Trey Lance. Now, is Trey Lance a day one starter? I'm still trying to find more Trey Lance film because he doesn't really have a lot of film out there. It's really hard to find games from North Dakota State. But in a couple of games that I have watched, the condensed games, I mean, he's really good when it comes to making decisions. I mean, you can't go a whole entire year without throwing an interception and not be a good decision maker. I don't care if it's D2, D3, D4, D5, Yaya or JUCO. If you go a whole entire season without throwing an interception, that is really impressive. That means you understand where to go with the football. That means you are really accurate with the football as well. You also have reliable wide receivers because there's a good amount of interceptions that get caught based off tips. So for Trey Lance, I think he'll be a really good fit in Chicago. And I think Chicago with their new OC, well, not their new OC, but the OC who took over last year in Lazar, I think with him being able to get the most out of Mitchell Trubisky, he should be able to design the offense to get the most out of Trey Lance as a rookie. And I think he could be a good day one starter. But if not, alternative option could be Chicago brings in Alex Smith, sign him to a 1, maybe 2-year deal. Then you go ahead and once that contract is up and Alex Smith retires, then Trey Lance goes ahead and he becomes a starting quarterback if you wanted to go with an option B. But I do feel like Chicago trading up to select Trey Lance would make the most sense because you're picking 20th overall. Pretty much the only quarterbacks left around there most likely would be Mac Jones or Kyle Trask, and I would rather have Trey Lance over Mac Jones any one of those guys because I feel like Trey Lance has more potential and you get more upside if you can get Trey Lance in the right system. You see, a lot of people fail to understand that the quarterback position in this day and age isn't about who's the most talented. It's about which quarterback goes to the best team that can maximize their talent with the proper coaching staff. Those is what separates the quarterbacks from bust from the quarterbacks that are actually good. Every single quarterback that's been a bust went to a bad team. Every single quarterback that has succeeded in the NFL or has had above average success in the NFL has went to a pretty good, decent organization or with the above average coaching staff. So you look at Trey Lance going to the Chicago Bears with that defense, and they're able to add some pieces on the offensive line, maybe try to get another wide receiver. I think Trey Lance can have success long term with the Chicago Bears. I have Carolina taking Mac Jones with the 8th overall selection. Carolina probably could trade down as well if Trey Lance isn't on the board and Justin Fields is off the board. But Mac Jones, I feel, is really overhated. I feel like a lot of people hate on Mac Jones just because he's wide and he doesn't have a ton of athleticism, which it's true. He isn't the most athletic guy like a Trey Lance or a Fields, but he does have some mobility out there that he can extend a play or two from time to time, and he can pick up 4 or 5 yards if you allow him to. But Mac Jones, in my opinion, probably is the second best passer in this draft class. I mean, this dude is pinpoint and accurate. I mean, he throws wide receivers open. This dude just doesn't wait for wide receivers to get open and throws in the ball. Like, you can tell the difference between an accurate quarterback and a non-accurate quarterback because accurate quarterbacks throw receivers open. Once they finish their route, the ball is there. You also look at Mac Jones. He's really good when it comes to reading the field and making decisions, something that Justin Fields isn't really all that great at doing. I like Mac Jones a lot. I think he'll be a really good fit with Joe Brady in that offense that they run. It's a methodical offense. Doesn't involve throwing the football down the field all that often. It involves being methodical. It involves timing. It involves position route running from the wide receivers. And you also got to have a quarterback that throws with good anticipation that's really accurate. And Mac Jones reminds me a lot of Joe Burrow. Remember, Joe Brady was the offensive coordinator for LSU, Joe Burrow's final year at LSU. And Mac Jones kind of reminds me a lot of Joe Burrow, just a less athletic version of Joe Burrow, which is why I think Mac Jones will be a really good fit for the Carolina Panthers at the 8th overall selection. I have Patrick Surtain going number 9 to the Denver Broncos. They obviously need a corner. That is one of their biggest weaknesses on their defense. And I do think Patrick Surtain is the best defensive prospect in this draft class, either him or Caleb Farley. If you're Denver, you can go with either one. Have Caleb Farley going to the Dallas Cowboys with the 10th overall selection. Like, these two guys are pretty much hand in hand, basically. It just depends on which one you like more, which one's film you're more impressed with. But Jalen Waddle going to the New York Giants. I mean, I got to say it again. I'm not really that big of a fan when it comes to Jalen Waddle. But, I mean, if you're Dave Gettleman and you have Jalen Waddle on the board, I think you have to go ahead and select him. My question is, can you expect Jalen Waddle to become that number 1 wide receiver? Because a lot of people are really high on Jalen Waddle. Some people have him rated as the best wide receiver prospect in this draft class. I don't really know. And my biggest question with Jalen Waddle is, okay, is this guy just a bona fide deep threat like Henry Ruggs? Because I feel like if you're going this high in the draft, you shouldn't just be drafting a wide receiver just because he has potential to become an elite deep threat. I feel like if you draft a wide receiver in the first round, he has to be, or at least in the top 15, he has to be able to become a true number 1 wide receiver, not just a bona fide deep threat. I feel like he has to be able to become more. I feel like he has to be able to become that guy who you can rely on to do the dirty work in the middle of the field. And if you're the New York Giants, that's really what you need. So Jalen Waddle going to the New York Giants comes with a lot of risk, but it also is a lot of high reward as well, because if he can become that guy with that speed and what he's able to do with the ball in his hands, he has potential to become one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. Not only that, but he could have more potential than Tyreek Hill. So for Jalen Waddle, I mean, I think he is a pretty big boom or bust prospect. prospect because I'm not really that big of a fan of his route running. I mean, it's decent. It's better than John Ross. It's better than most speedsters who are going in the first round. But me personally, I still wish there were better options available if I were the New York Giants. But like I said, Jalen Waddle, if he's able to develop into that number one wide receiver, then you got yourself a pretty good wide receiver, and I think you got yourself a pretty good selection, 11th overall. Have offensive tackle Rashawn Slater out of Northwestern going to the 49ers. Don't know if the 49ers are going to be able to get a deal done with Trent Williams. It looks like he's going to end up cashing out in free agency. So for the 49ers, the next best thing is to get younger on the offensive line, make sure that you're able to still be able to run the football effectively and protect Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, Rashawn Slater, I don't think he's all that far off from Penny Sewell. I think he's really good. When you look at the offensive line for Northwestern, Rashawn Slater really stands out. He does a lot of good things well, and I think he's a really good fit for the 49ers power run scheme that they like to run in San Francisco. 13th overall, I had Christian Darrisaw out of Virginia Tech going to the LA Chargers. There's some people out there who think Christian Darrisaw is better than Rashawn Slater, which I can understand that both of those prospects are pretty good. All of the offensive tackle prospects that are mocked to go in the first round are all pretty good. If you take Penny Sewell out of the situation, Penny Sewell wasn't in his draft class, then it would be a big, long debate about who is the best offensive tackle in this draft class, because that's pretty much how close everybody is aside from Penny Sewell. You really couldn't make any mistakes, and I think for the LA Chargers, your biggest priority has to be protecting Justin Herbert, because the name of the game is a passing lead, and if this is a passing lead and you're relying on great quarterback play, you have to be able to give your quarterback time to drop back and throw. So I think Christian Darrisaw is a no-brainer pick for the Chargers, 13th overall. 14th, I have the Minnesota Vikings taking Elijah Vera Tucker out of USC. He can play guard. He can play tackle. I think he will be pretty good at tackle because he does have pretty good footwork. He is able to keep up with the edge rushers, but I also wouldn't be mad if Minnesota felt comfortable swinging him out to guard as well, because he has that kind of versatility. He really is I think he's the most versatile player in this draft class. I think he's a scheme fit wherever he goes, no matter the offense. I think he'll be a pretty good fit. I have Kyle Pitts going to the New England Patriots, 15th overall. Really, if you're New England and you really like Kyle Trask, then yeah. But I mean, I think a big part of that offense involves the tight end, and we saw how that New England Patriots offense struggled last year when they didn't have a good tight end. So you bring in Kyle Pitts, you can line him out wide, you can keep him at tight end. Some people might think that he could have success at wide receiver and kind of be like a poor man's version of Calvin Johnson. Now, I don't know how big of a fan I would be of Kyle Pitts transferring or moving his position from tight end to wide receiver. I think he'll be a really good tight end, because I think that with his versatility, he could be a matchup problem, because he's too big for most corners and most safeties to stick on, and he's basically too fast for most linebackers unless you get a Devin White or you got your Devin Bush or your Deion Buchanan's out there. But I like Kyle Pitts a lot. Listen, for New England, I think they need a great tight end, because you can utilize him the same way you use Rock Gronkowski, the same way Kansas City uses Travis Kelce. That's what Kyle Pitts is. Kyle Pitts is starting to become the new norm of what you want in the NFL from the tight end position. It used to be you want a good blocking tight end, but now you want a tight end with the NFL moving more towards a pass-heavy offense now for majority of teams. You want a tight end that's able to be great in the pass game, sort of like another wide receiver, and that's what Kyle Pitts is. 16th overall, I have the Arizona Cardinals selecting edge rusher Gregory Rousseau. Now, this mock draft is taking place after J.J. Watt signed with the Arizona Cardinals. Now you got Chandler Jones. Now you got J.J. Watt. Now you add in Gregory Rousseau. That's going to help out Gregory Rousseau a lot, because then you're going to have J.J. Watt and Chandler Jones drawing attention. Then that's going to free up opportunities for Gregory Rousseau to get pressure on the quarterback. Now, my big thing, and I've been saying this offseason about Gregory Rousseau, is he reminds me a lot like Vic Beasley. As a matter of fact, I think he's Vic Beasley 2.0. Yes, he has the size. Yes, he has the length. Yes, he has the athleticism. He has the frame to become one of the best pass rushers in the NFL, but he's extremely raw, doesn't have a lot of pass rush moves, doesn't really have that much but really one good season on tape. So if you're Arizona, you're trusting in your coaching staff to be able to develop Gregory Rousseau into one of those dominant pass rushers, and I think he's another boomer bust prospect, which is why he reminds me exactly like Vic Beasley, because a lot of people had these same concerns about Vic Beasley when he was coming out of Clemson a couple of years ago. So for Gregory Rousseau, you're going to Arizona. You don't have to step in and be that guy right away, because you're going to have Chandler Jones on one end and you're going to have J.J. Watt a couple of spots down from you, who's going to be drawing a lot of attention from opposing offensive coordinators. That Gregory Rousseau should have more than enough opportunities to get his good numbers up and be able to make an impact. And I think if you add Gregory Rousseau to the Arizona Cardinals defensive line, then I think they have a really formidable defensive line. As a matter of fact, I think they could have a top 10 defensive line depending on how Gregory Rousseau performs, like how we expect him to from a first round selection at the edge rush position. Have Michael Parsons out of Penn State going to the Las Vegas Raiders. Michael Parsons, I think, is a little overrated, because I mean, like, he didn't play last year, so we don't know what football shape he is in, and he still has coverage issues. And I feel like in the modern day in the NFL, you need to have a linebacker that can cover. I mean, if you're a linebacker and you're going in the first round and you can't cover, then I don't think you deserve to be going in the first round, because in this day and age in the NFL, this is a passing league. You need to have, linebackers who can cover the middle, who can cover a certain amount of the field. And I look at Michael Parsons, I don't know if he can. Now, he's really good blitzing off the edge. He also can be a pretty good pass rusher in certain situations, but at the end of the day, if I'm selecting a linebacker in the first round, I'm not selecting a linebacker for your ability to, just rush the passer and blitz. Like, if you're a middle linebacker, supposedly, I need to be able to see that you can cover a certain part of the field. So really, in this day and age of the NFL, if you can't cover and you're not that good in pass coverage, and your pass coverage ability is a question, then I don't think you're worth the first round pick, which is why I don't view Michael Parsons as a top 10 prospect like a lot of people do. Like, I don't know if he can cover. Now, if he can cover, then I'll give it to him, but I just don't know if he can, which is why I have him falling to the Las Vegas Raiders with the 17th overall selection. I still have Najee Harris going to the Miami Dolphins. I think Najee Harris is the best running back in this draft class. He's a really good running back. Some people may say Travis Etienne, which is understandable, but I'll take Najee Harris over Travis Etienne, because Travis Etienne is also really good catching ball out of the backfield. But Najee Harris is a really patient runner. He waits for the holes to develop, but also that he is probably a really good run blocker as well. He may be the best run blocking back we've seen since I don't know when. I think he's a better run blocker than Travis Etienne, which is why I say I think that Najee Harris is a more complete back than what Travis Etienne is right now, which is why I have the Dolphins taking Harris with the 18th overall selection. I have Terrace Marshall going to Washington now. In my first mock draft a couple of days ago, like a week ago, I had Washington taking Kadarius Toney. But the more I look at it, the more I view Terrace Marshall as a guy who could potentially become a number one or a really good number two wide receiver. I think Terrace Marshall has a really great skill set. And I really think the more I watch Terrace Marshall play, the more I look at Terrace Marshall as kind of being like a undervalued prospect amongst the draft community, because this guy is also a really good route runner. And you got to remember, this guy was the third best wide receiver on the LSU team that had Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. And you look at what Terrace Marshall did this year with LSU with the not ideal quarterback situation. I mean, I think he'll be a perfect fit in Washington. I like Kadarius Toney a lot, but I think Terrace Marshall would be a really good complementary piece alongside of Terry McLaurin. So you got Terry McLaurin, who's already getting enough attention as it is. That's going to open up opportunities for Terrence Marshall to go ahead and get some. I like Terrence Marshall a lot, and I swap picks. That's why I have him going 19th instead of Kadarius Toney. I have the Detroit Lions, who had the 20th overall selection, because remember, I had them trading down the 7th overall selection with the Chicago Bears, and I had them selecting edge rusher Jaelan Phillips. Now, depending on the defense that Detroit is going to run, if you're going to run a 4-3, then I think you probably want him at end. If you're going to run a 3-4, I think you probably would utilize him as an outside linebacker. But for Detroit, your biggest flaw on defense last year was the fact that you didn't have that much pass rush and you didn't blitz all that often. So if you're Detroit, I think edge rusher is a pretty big need, and I think Jaelan Phillips is the best edge rusher in this draft class because I think he's the most polished. He has the best film out of all the edge rushers as well, and on top of that, he is a guy who should be able to come in and produce, at least give you 7-6 sacks right away as a rookie, which I think is pretty good. So you look at Detroit, I think Detroit right now, you don't need a guy like a Gregory Rousseau. I think you need a guy who you know what you can get right now. And for Jaelan Phillips, I think you can get a guy in Jaelan Phillips who comes off right off the bat and gives you 6-7 sacks. And I know Detroit Lions fans are really, sold on Michael Parsons, but I don't really think Michael Parsons is what Detroit needs at the linebacker position. If Detroit was going to use their pick on the linebacker, it probably would be Xavier Collins or the linebacker from Notre Dame, because those two linebackers are way better in pass coverage than Michael Parsons. Michael Parsons isn't that great in pass coverage, and that's what Detroit needs. They need a linebacker who can cover a certain area of the field. So if you can't get that, then you go ahead and you select edge rusher, and I think Jaelan Phillips is the best edge rusher in this draft class. I mean, he has pretty good pass rush moves. His film is pretty solid, and I think he's a guy who could be a really good day one contributor for the Lions day one. I have Kadarius Toney going to the Indianapolis Colts with the 21st overall selection. I think Kadarius Toney is a really good fit in Indianapolis because, okay, you got Michael Pittman, you're going to have Paris Campbell coming back, you got Zach Pascal, but you need a dynamic playmaker, and that's what Kadarius Toney is. I think that's one thing that the wide receiving core of Indianapolis has lacked for years, is a guy who is dynamic with the ball in his hands, and that's what Kadarius Toney is. He's really a good route runner as well, and he's really good getting off the line. You can put him at slot. I also think you can put him outside as well. Have the Titans selecting edge rusher Kwity Paye. Here's the thing with Kwity Paye. Okay, his film isn't bad, but I just didn't really see anything that made me go, wow, okay, Kwity Paye is this guy. I think he would be better off with the Tennessee Titans just because he reminds me a lot of A.J. Epinesa. I don't think he's the most athletically gifted guy, but I do think that he will fit well in Tennessee's defense. On top of that, I think Kwity Paye I think his ceiling is a guy, he could end up being an 8-9 sack guy. Is his ceiling, but for right now, he reminds me a lot of AJ Epinesa. I'm not really just all that blown away with Kwity Paye. I have Jaycee Horn, cornerback from South Carolina, going to the New York Jets. With the New York Jets, I mean, I think he's a pretty good fit because he's pretty good in zone coverage. He's pretty good in press coverage as well. But his biggest questions that people have with Jaycee Horn are his ability to tackle, and also how is he in all coverage playing off wide receivers. He is like a Denzel Ward clone. And I was talking to one of my college dorm mates about this yesterday. Like, we're now starting to see more corners who are really good in coverage, but they, have concerns when it comes to their ability to consistently tackle. We're starting to see a lot more Denzel Ward. So for Jaycee Horn, my question is he going to be able to wrap up? But other than that, I think he's one of the best corners in this draft class. I have Samuel Cosmi off the tackle out of Texas going to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Listen, I get why people believe the Steelers should go halfback in the first round, but there's so much talent at halfback this year that you get a halfback in the second, third round. What's the point of drafting a halfback in the first round if you don't have the guys up front to create running lanes? And I think a lot of people forget that, okay? Like, it doesn't matter how good of a halfback you have if you have a bad offensive line, okay? So, I mean, I think the name of the game is being able to win up front. And I tell people this, and I'm say it again, I might have to get a shirt made. Football is still a game that is won and lost in the trenches. If you can't win up front, you can't do anything. So if Pittsburgh's off the line isn't good, then they can't run the football. Like last year, it wasn't just the running back position. It was the fact that the off the line just wasn't creating a lot of running lanes. You can blame the halfback all you want to, but if your off the line isn't creating running lanes and room to run, then you're going to be pretty ineffective. On top of that, they need another offensive tackle for Andre Villanueva set to hit free agency, and it doesn't look like Pittsburgh is going to be able to free up enough cap space to retain him. So they do need a really good tackle, which I think Samuel Cosmi may be the second or third best pass blocker in this draft class, and I think he's pretty good in the run department as well. So for Pittsburgh, I think offensive tackle is a way bigger need than halfback right now. Like, okay, you do have the ability to get a good halfback in the first round. Nobody's denying that. But also, when you're taking a halfback in the first round, when you think about the halfbacks who have had success in the first round, like McCaffrey, Saquon. I mean, Saquon's off the line wasn't that good, but he was able to make the most out of it. But I mean, for Pittsburgh, you're in a situation right now where your offensive line is in dire need, and you also need to protect Ben Roethlisberger with him expected to return. That quarterback, with his age, he's not built to be taking too many hits, so you need to protect him as well, which is why I think offensive tackle is the way to go with the 24th overall selection by the Steelers. 25th overall, I have Eric Stokes out of Georgia going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. I like Eric Stokes. I think he's a really good physical corner, and I think you pair him alongside of C.J. Henderson. I think you have a pretty good tandem at corner there. I have Xavier Collins, linebacker out of Tulsa, going to the Browns. A lot of Browns fans feel like they don't need a linebacker, which I can understand that, but I mean, your defense doesn't really have that many holes. So, I mean, why not go linebacker? I mean, where else would you want to go? I mean, you have a guy like Xavier Collins who may be the second best pass coverage or even the best pass coverage linebacker in this draft class. Not only that, but he's pretty good blitzing off the edge, and he has high football IQ as well. So I'm looking at Xavier Collins. I think he would be a perfect fit alongside a fellow Browns linebacker Mack Wilson. And then you go ahead and you pretty much have one of the best defenses in the NFL from a pure talent standpoint with the addition of Xavier Collins. 27th overall, I have Rashad Bateman still going to the Baltimore Ravens. I just feel like Rashad, you guys ever look at a prospect and you just look at it and you be like, you know, he is 100% great fit for this team. I think that guy is Rashad Bateman. When you look at Rashad Bateman, I look at Rashad Bateman, a big physical wide receiver who I just look at him and I say this guy is the perfect fit, match made in heaven for the Baltimore Ravens. You need a true number one wide receiver. You don't really have that in Marquise Brown. Marquise Brown is more of a Robin. He's not really a Batman. You look at Rashad Bateman, he is a Batman. He can be that number one guy. This guy can also move a lot for his size as well. Like, he has very phenomenal size. He is a really big target downfield that Baltimore has been looking for. They've been looking for that big physical wide receiver that could be a really good deep threat for a couple of years now. I think they were hoping that Miles Boykin could be that guy, but Miles Boykin hasn't really materialized or developed the way, you know, myself and a lot of Ravens fans were expecting him to develop. 28th overall, I have Kyle Trask going to the Saints. the Saints may not be able to keep Jameis Winston. As of right now, they're still under the cap, so they still don't have any money to sign anybody. And Jameis Winston, if Dak Prescott hits, or gets franchise tagged by Dallas, then I think Jameis Winston probably is the best quarterback available right now. And I think he most likely could end up going to a team like Chicago that is in dire need of a quarterback. So if you're New Orleans, you're going to have to be prepared for that, and you're going to have to go ahead and draft Kyle Trask, because I don't really think Taysom Hill is that guy. I don't think he could be able to sustain success long enough to get the Saints to the playoffs. He was good for a couple of games this year, but we start to see a couple of teams figure him out. So I think Kyle Trask would be a really good option there. 29th over, I have Rondale Moore from Purdue going to the Packers. Rondale Moore could be a really good number 2 option. He's really good. As a matter of fact, I think Rondale Moore is better than Jalen Waddle. I think he's more polished. Now, he doesn't have the elite speed that Jalen Waddle possesses, but I think he's a better route runner. I think he's just an overall better wide receiver than Jalen Waddle as of right now, which I think he'll be a really good fit. You pair him alongside Devontae Adams, MVS, and Allen Lazard, then I think Aaron Rodgers finally gets, some more help at wide receiver with Rondale Moore. Have Nick Bolton out of Missouri going to the Buffalo Bills. They're going to be losing Matt Milano to free agency, so they're going to have to bring in a guy to replace him. Matt Milano's going to be walking away because Buffalo just doesn't have enough salary cap to give him a reasonable contract, which is why he's going to be hitting the free agency market. Now, with the last 2 selections, I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Kansas City Chiefs closing off the draft. Don't see any trades happening. Have Jalen Mayfield out of Michigan going to Kansas City. Kansas City needs some more depth, some more talent at the offensive tackle spots. Dylan Moses reminds me a lot of the Levante David. I know he had a down year this year, but like I said, he can cover. And I still think his pass coverage abilities are up there with some of the better linebackers in this year's draft class. I still think even with a down year that Dylan Moses probably is a late first, early second round guy, which is why I think Tampa Bay will be a really good fit. And I know a lot of Tampa Bay fans will be like, well, we may be able to keep Levante David. He wants to be one of the highest paid linebackers in the NFL, so you either got to pay him, or you got to either franchise tag him, or you either got to franchise tag Shaq Barrett. I don't think Tampa Bay will be able to keep neither one of those guys and keep both of those guys happy, or both on them returning to the roster. So this is it for my NFL 2021 Mock Draft 2.0 with trades. Let me know what you guys think about it down in the comment section down below. Make sure that you guys like the video.